Under the wide, sunlit skies of central Washington, crop dusters fly just feet above the earth, precise, relentless, and often unnoticed. These aerial applicators are experts in a field where the margin for error is razor thin, and the work leaves no room for hesitation. Among them was Gavin Morse, a veteran pilot and co-owner of Gemtrek LLC with over 7,000 hours in the air, 5,000 of those in the very aircraft he flew that day. But experience, as this story reveals, is not always enough to escape the unforgiving laws of flight. A master of his craft, flying a mission he'd completed countless times before, fell victim to a mistake so subtle yet so final. Here's what happened. The aircraft, a 1996 Air Tractor AT602, registration November 602, Golf Hotel, was purpose-built for the demanding job of aerial application. With a restricted category airworthiness certificate, this plane was designed for agricultural spraying under FAR Part 137, a type of commercial operation that doesn't typically require a filed flight plan, and the mission was spraying pesticides over a designated farm field near Lind, Washington. This wasn't Gavin's first time flying this mission, nor was it new terrain. At 38 years old, he had built a career that stretched across the U.S. and even internationally, working with firms such as Royal Flying Service, B&R Aerial Crop Care, and Fender Flying Service. With a commercial pilot certificate and a valid second-class medical certificate, he was fully qualified to operate that day's flight. Despite not holding an instrument rating, a common trait among crop dusters who fly strictly visual missions, his deep familiarity with both the aircraft and the region made him a trusted figure. On July 2, 2022, Gavin embarked on another routine operation, departing from his hangar just after refueling and reloading the aircraft's hopper. The objective was clear: apply pesticide over a nearby field using a low-altitude, methodical racetrack pattern. No flight plan was required, and none was filed, which is standard procedure in this line of work. However, what began as another day in the skies over Grant County would end in tragedy just 16 minutes after takeoff. So, what happened? It was around 5:17 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time when Gavin Morse took off above Warden, Washington. The air tractor AT602, loaded with pesticide and fueled for another short-range agricultural mission, lifted off without incident. As with countless previous flights, Gavin followed the familiar racetrack pattern typical of aerial spraying, low-level passes from west to east across the crop field. These low-altitude flights demand acute situational awareness, sharp reflexes, and complete confidence in both pilot and machine. There is little margin for error when flying mere feet above treetops, wires, and terrain. For Gavin, this was not new. His deep experience made him comfortable navigating such environments. But comfort, even experience, can sometimes conceal subtle risks. Just 16 minutes into the flight, the routine became anything but. Surveillance footage from a building about a mile away captured the aircraft flying wings level, steady, stable. Then came a steep right turn, a maneuver likely intended to reverse course and continue the spraying pattern. Yet within just 7 seconds, that maneuver unraveled into catastrophe. The aircraft pitched sharply nose down, the right wing dropping low as it descended behind a low hill. Then, silence. A rising plume of dust was the only sign that something had gone terribly wrong. The wreckage was found roughly 4.5 nautical miles east of the departure point, resting in an open field. Despite the violent descent, the airplane impacted the ground in a nearly flat and upright attitude, suggesting that Gavin had not entirely lost control. There was no fire, but the scent of Jet A fuel lingered in the air. The debris field extended about 190 feet, and all major components of the aircraft were accounted for, confined within this area. So what happened here was not an in-flight breakup or mechanical explosion, it was a hard, unforgiving impact. This was a bright, calm afternoon in eastern Washington, and it ended with the loss of an experienced pilot, a husband, and a business owner in a profession where risk is part of the job, but tragedy never routine. Post-accident examination told a clear mechanical story. The engine, a Pratt & Whitney PT6A65AG turboprop, was generating high power at the time of impact. Flight control continuity was confirmed from the cockpit to all surfaces. There were no signs of pre-crash mechanical failure. The aircraft was, by all technical accounts, performing as expected, And that is what makes this accident so painful, because it wasn't the machine that failed. So the real question here should focus on the pilot. How does an experienced pilot, someone with thousands of hours in the same aircraft, end up in a fatal crash on a routine flight? How can something so familiar, so practiced, go so suddenly and irreversibly wrong? The short answer is this: aerodynamics doesn't care how many hours are in your logbook. The longer answer lies in the specific maneuver that brought Gavin Morse's flight to its tragic end. According to the NTSB, the crash occurred because the pilot exceeded the critical angle of attack during a steep turn. That exceeded angle led to a classic but deadly result: an aerodynamic stall. And because the aircraft was flying low, as is standard in crop dusting operations, there was no altitude left to recover. Let's unpack that. The angle of attack is one of the most fundamental concepts in flight. It's the angle between the wing's chord line and the oncoming airflow. In simple terms, it's how tilted the wing is relative to the air it's slicing through. Increase it too much, and the smooth airflow over the wing breaks up. The wing stops generating lift. That's called a stall. It's not a problem exclusive to new pilots. It's a risk that can catch even the best off guard, especially when maneuvering aggressively. Now imagine an aircraft like the air tractor AT602, a powerful single-seat machine designed to fly low and fast while carrying heavy loads of pesticide or fertilizer. When that aircraft makes a steep, tight turn, the forces acting on it increase dramatically. The wings are suddenly under more pressure to maintain lift. To compensate, the pilot naturally pulls back, raising the angle of attack. But if they pull just a bit too much, even for a moment, the critical threshold is crossed. The wings stop flying, the plane drops, and that's precisely what happened to Gavin Morse. He was likely executing a tight reversal turn, part of the racetrack pattern used in spraying fields. Surveillance video showed the aircraft flying level before entering a sharp right turn. Within just 7 seconds, the plane nosed over and dropped out of the sky. There was no fire, no in-flight breakup, no engine failure. In fact, the engine was operating at high power at the moment of impact. Flight controls were intact, weather was clear. The only failure was aerodynamic. The wing stalled and gravity did the rest. And yet, this wasn't the mistake of a careless rookie. Gavin had over 7,000 total flight hours, including 5,000 hours in the AT602. He was co-owner of his own agricultural aviation company. He knew the aircraft, he knew the field, he knew the mission. But sometimes, when you've flown the same field 100 times, familiarity can blur the edge of risk. You know your aircraft, you trust your instincts, and that trust can cause you to push the envelope, not recklessly, but subtly, almost imperceptibly. Maybe the turn was just a little too steep, maybe the airspeed dipped slightly, maybe the load shifted a bit in the hopper. Alone, any one of those things might not matter, but together they create a situation where a stall becomes not just possible, but inevitable. And tragically, there was no altitude left to fix it. This exact scenario has played out before. In May 2019, a veteran pilot flying an air tractor AT502B crashed during a crop dusting run near Silverton, Texas. Like Gavin, he was highly experienced, over 9,000 hours in the air. Like Gavin, he entered a steep, low-altitude turn. And like Gavin, he stalled and crashed before he could recover. The NTSB reached the same conclusion. The pilot exceeded the angle of attack during a turn at too low an altitude. The similarities are unsettling. 2 veteran pilots, 2 air tractors, 2 low-altitude turns, 2 stalls, no second chances. One might ask, why such a steep turn? It could be operational. Tight turns save time and reduce overlap in pesticide application. Or perhaps it was simply a byproduct of repetition, a pattern flown hundreds of times before without incident. We wouldn't have a chance to know the real reason, but on this day, it was proved a fatal decision. So what can be done? Many modern aircraft, particularly those used in training or commercial airline operations, are equipped with angle of attack indicators. These devices give pilots real-time visual cues when they're approaching stall conditions, even if everything else feels normal. In agricultural aviation, however, such instruments are not standard. Pilots often rely solely on instinct and feel. Would an angle of attack indicator have saved Gavin Morse? It's impossible to say with certainty, but it may have given him an early warning, just enough to ease the turn, lower the nose, regain lift, just enough to avoid becoming another statistic. Then there's the issue of industry training and culture. Agricultural pilots face a unique set of pressures: cover more acres, fly more loads, finish before the wind picks up or the light fades. That pressure can push even seasoned pilots into flying more aggressively, taking tighter turns, cutting closer margins. The industry must ask itself, are we doing enough to reinforce the aerodynamic limits these pilots face daily? And finally, it's worth reflecting on how we talk about experience. Experience is invaluable. It saves lives, prevents errors, builds confidence, but it can also create false security. The longer you do something without consequence, the more you believe you're immune from error. But aerodynamics isn't influenced by past success. It's binary. The wing is either flying or it's not. And once it's not, no amount of experience can bring it back in time. In the end, Gavin Morse's death was not the result of carelessness at all. It was a momentary misjudgment, made in a high-risk environment during a routine operation he'd likely performed hundreds of times. That's what makes this accident so haunting, because it could happen to any agricultural pilot on any day, in any field, and that's why we must talk about it, not to assign blame, but to learn, adapt, and prevent the next one. That's all for today's video. Thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates.